Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Yu Ying, for today, for giving us the time to share with us your experience, starting this new business and coming up with a totally new business model, right, for this new business. So maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you on this journey to discover this new business model, which led to your new venture.
Okay, thanks so much, Jeremy, for having me here. It's always been delightful to talk to you. So the new business that I set up is called Esevel. And, actually prior to that, I had set up a business called Artisan. So Artisan is actually more of a traditional ergonomic furniture kind of business. We do product design, and then we do the contract manufacturing, and then also the retail sale of ergonomic furniture itself. So quite early on, we began to feel that this industry had very competitive margins. And, there were many manufacturers from, various other countries where the manufacturing facilities were located who would then sell directly through e-commerce channels like Taobao, Lazada Mall, and so on. So it was, although our product was of like premium quality, it was quite difficult to compete with them. They're direct from manufacturers itself. So since then, I had been looking around for various ideas. I spoke to people like you. You really helped me, Jeremy, in thinking through this. And, I also looked at other businesses like Airbnb. I looked at Grab. I looked at WeWork as well. And I think what became really clear to me at some point in time was that people were consuming products in a different kind of way. It looked like they were consuming products and services more in a kind of bite-sized services model kind of way. So they actually wanted to get the benefits of the product itself, but not necessarily own the product. So for instance, Grab really intrigued me because instead of buying a car, people might now think of, I just can get a ride on demand instead of investing to buy a car. And similar for WeWork as well, I saw that instead of long office leases, companies were actually thinking of just co-working spaces on demand. So I looked at that, I spoke with you, and I was like thinking of various ways to change my business model, but the idea never came about, right? And then COVID struck, as we all know, and all of us were relegated to then working from home. Right. And then that was when I saw this opportunity really came about. Yeah, wow. So it was at that point in time. I actually started Esevel on the same day that Singapore started its circuit break.
Wow, okay. Very memorable. You never forget the day, right?
No, I'll never forget it.
Okay. Right. So were there any like warning signs even before COVID that really made you feel like this is the reason that makes me think that it's time, right, that I pivot into a very different business model?
Yeah, so I guess the warning signs had been there all the while. Like I mentioned earlier, it was the margins. They were extremely competitive if you were not a direct manufacturer yourself, right? So it was difficult to compete, I guess, unless I was a factory based in a low-cost production country. So, for a few years, we had experienced that already. So there was always this feeling that we needed to have a different kind of business model. Right. So otherwise it would have been difficult.
Right. Wow, I think that's something that, a lot of business owners are thinking about it now, right? They see the signs, but a lot of them also didn't take action until it's like too late. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about this process of the pivoting, right? Was it difficult? Like, was it difficult to do something new, something like nobody's doing, right? So maybe you can share with us a little bit about that process.
Sure. So the thing is that we didn't actually close down. We are still running our current company, and it's still doing quite well. So it's stable. It's just that it's not scaling that fast. So what I did was that actually I started up a new company, just based purely on this remote working kind of concept. So that was one way we did it. Another way was that we tried to make the experiment as quick and as painless as possible. Wow. So instead of doing something elaborate, and spending a lot of money and time on it, what we decided to do was that, my team and I just came up with a PowerPoint presentation. We spoke with manufacturing partners. We put products from my other company on it. And we said that, look, these are ergonomic furniture that are available for furniture as a service subscriptions, right? So in that way, we sent this out to our current clients, and we also sent this out to friends as well. And very quickly from then on, we saw traction on the more business to consumer front, and we got our first few customers from there. So I think that how we made it, less intimidating to us was that we just quickly experimented, had proof points, and then when the points proved themselves, we then moved on to the next step. So for instance, through the PowerPoint, we had acquired our first few customers. We immediately went on to create our own website. So within 2 weeks, we actually very quickly did up a website that automates the entire subscription process.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that the whole key to it was that, we did have this mental block as well. Like, we were invested very heavily in the current business model. We couldn't figure out how to change to the new one. But I think when we actually broke it down into easier steps, experiments and proof points, that it made it actually easier to change.
Wow, I like what you said about breaking it down into easier points, right? Because so often people get stuck. They look at this big thing, but I think the even before breaking it down into like the easier points, you mentioned something about you're already familiar with this industry, right? And I think that's
right.
very interesting because you are using like your core competency in this industry and using that as a base, but then you adapted it. So I thought that's very interesting, right? So maybe I want to ask a little bit more about this proving points, right? How do you know which are the correct proving points?
That's an interesting question over there. So I think for us, the customer is always the most important factor in it all. So, whether this is something that the customer actually wants. So I'm quite familiar with digital marketing. So we actually look at various aspects of digital marketing. For instance, things like the amount of time that someone spends on your page, the bounce rate, the amount of click-through rates and so on. So those are one of our proof points that we get at the initial stage of the funnel. And then in the middle point, it is, what is my team's experience while talking to that person? What are the points of confusion or, points which makes the potential customer hesitate to engage with us? Right. And then, we always do a survey at the end of this as well, customer review, so-called, to see what their experience is. So when we got our first few initial customers, we actually brought the whole process through this funnel. And, all the proof points were quite positive.
Wow.
So that was how we actually saw that, there is probably an opportunity in this for us.
Interesting. I think this is very fascinating because a lot of people, they like to put the cart before the horse, right? They like to put either some technology or some system. But you started the whole thing right from the customer's perspective, right? And through the whole journey, you took them through, and then you put your proof points based on what the customer feels or what the customer says, right? I think that's very interesting because very customer centric, I would say, right? So I think that's a great lesson. I think a lot of business owners will probably need to be reminded, right? Not to be distracted by the bells and whistles, but always come back to the customer, right? Right.
Yep, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. So that was what we felt as well through the many years of experience that we had in the industry.
Great. Wow, that's very good. So maybe you can shed some light on what do you think are the biggest obstacle to help another business owner who is like facing the same kind of obstacles that you were facing, right? Either they feel that their business is going to be disrupted, or they find that their business model is no longer going to be growing very fast, but they are kind of like stuck. What would your advice be to them? What do you think is their biggest obstacle, and how do you think they can overcome that?
So actually, I think that the biggest obstacle for myself, if I could say, because I went through the same process, is that if I were to be totally honest, right, it was mental. It was my own mental blockages towards changing. Because I had felt that, hey, look, I had invested so many years, I invested all this money, and my business is actually not bad, like where it is going, right? Do I really need to change? So I think that was really like where I needed to break out of. And eventually I did break out of it because it wasn't scaling, as fast as I hoped that it would be. Yeah.
Right.
So I think the very first thing is to clear our own mental blockages of it.
Right. Right.
I did hear someone tell me once that everyone wants to transform, but nobody wants to change. Right.
Right.
So I think like our own self-awareness and being aware of
Mm,
the need to change is very important. I
right.
think that then the second thing that they could do is to, in order to reassure themselves that the change is the right change to do, is that they could put in all these proof points, give themselves
Right.
like certain KPIs to meet, certain goals to meet. Once they
Right.
meet that, they move on to the next stage, move on to the next stage. So it then becomes a very mechanical process,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's
Right.
something that they had agreed on internally or within their team beforehand,
Right.
that I'll
Right.
meet this goal and then I'll move on to the next stage, right?
Right.
So the third thing, which I think could be helpful, is that if they actually did this transformation within the industry that they are familiar with,
Mm,
then they can actually, utilize the experience that they build up, the network that they've built up, maybe even some of the infrastructure that they've built up in
right.
order to pivot their business model.
Wow. I think I really like your advice because I think you made it sound like very simple, for
Oh, it's definitely not simple.
yeah, it's definitely
As you
not simple,
yourself know,
right?
Jeremy, yes.
Yeah. But I like the way you make it very systematic. And in
Mhm.
the first point you brought up about overcoming ourselves, right? Um, I think that's so key, right? Because a lot of times business owners either they are really successful, and then for them to try again, so to speak, right? That's that's
Yes,
that's where it
exactly.
becomes a bit frightening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's almost a bit like climbing up a mountain,
Mm,
and then, you could continue along a comfortable kind of incline going up, or
right.
you put another Mount Everest in front of yourself, right?
Right. Right.
So that is what it feels like. You have to be emotionally invested in it, and you have to be mentally prepared to
Wow.
transform.
Right. And then after that, breaking it down into those proving points or smaller milestones, right? So that it becomes manageable, right?
Yes, yes. And also to prove to your team as well that, hey, look, this is working.
Ah, interesting. Proving to your team. So did you have like skeptics within your team?
I would say not actually. Yes, I think my team were all pretty aligned on this. So,
Right.
but I think partially it has to do because of the unique circumstances that we are in
Mm-hmm.
now, right?
Mm-hmm.
With COVID-19 and, suddenly this huge number of people in the workforce
Yep.
moving towards work from home.
Yep.
So the
Yep.
opportunity became quite clear and quite compelling to them.
Well, that's great because I think finding that right team to drive a transformation is so important. Like very often we
Mm-hmm.
hear people who the boss wants to go forward, but then there'll be people who have
Mm-hmm.
reservations. But I think in,
Mm-hmm.
in your particular case, everything seems to fit in, right? You had almost like a year of planning since the last time we spoke, right? And you were
Mm-hmm.
chewing on this. And I think that must have kind of like also helped you to prepare your team, right? Because you probably would have bounced off ideas with them. And then, the COVID came and then you just decided it's time to do it, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, to be frank with you, right, I didn't have any idea of what I wanted to do as well before
Right.
COVID came, right?
Okay.
Because, I mean, I guess that's another reason why transformation is hard, because you know that you need to transform, but transform into what,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So that was really what I was like struggling with as well. There was an urgency to transform, but
Yeah.
transform into what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it wasn't until the whole phenomenon of remote working came about that
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
then knew what it was that we had to do.
Right. Right. But I find it interesting because I don't think it's a one lucky moment. It's probably
Mm-hmm.
you were preparing yourself for this moment, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
it kind of like came, you just knew what to do, right? So I think that's amazing because so many people kind of like wait until something happens, then they start that thinking process, right? What you amaze me is that you started this thinking process before anything happened, so that when it actually happened, you were ready, right? So I think that's really I find that very inspiring, and I think that's something I want to tell every business leader that even now we are in the middle of COVID. This might be a little bit too late because you should have started thinking 1 year ago, but still you better start thinking now in case there's a next crisis, right?
Yeah, yeah. I've seen many amazing, stories of businesses pivoting as well. So
Right.
it's all those stories are very inspirational to me as well.
Right. Yep. So really thank you for your time. I think in this very short interview, I just wanted to catch up, and hear how this has been for you, right? Because I know from our chit chat, that you are moving into this. But I thought many business owners would definitely benefit from your experience. So I think thank
Definitely.
you
Yeah.
once again for your time. Is there any last words or advice or inspiration you want to share with other business owners who will watch this video?
I'm not sure whether I'm in a position to give like inspirational advice yet, but definitely for sure. I mean, if any of your friends or any of your customers feel like they want to speak to someone who
Mhm.
is used to be from the traditional, or rather still is in the traditional industry and is thinking of moving on, I'll be
Right.
happy to have a chat with
Wow.
them as
Thank you
well.
so much. Wow.
It's
Yeah,
a difficult process, I think. Yeah.
yes. But I think you will definitely be inspiring others, because like you said, it's not easy, right? It's for us, it was not easy. And I've got other
Yep.
clients who went through, it's like almost like from one end of the spectrum they want to retrench people, and the next end of the spectrum they manage to pivot,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
suddenly they were able to give a new lease of life, right, to
Hmm.
everybody. So
Hmm.
definitely, I thank you in advance for your offer, and I'll definitely take you up on that if there's anybody who wants to
Sure.
talk to you,
Yeah.
right? So
Sure.
thank you very much for your time, and let's catch up again.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks very much
Thank
for having
you.
me.
Thank you. Okay, goodbye.
Bye.